All right, so Springboard has just not been working great for us. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Springboard, but we're going to watch it through Edpuzzle and kind of interact that way together in the hopes that Springboard, and Edpuzzle together make this work. And so what we're going to talk about here today is characterization. Okay, characterization is where you do a couple different things. So first, we're going to be making inferences. Okay, an inference is where you take a clue, right, and you use it to figure something else out. So if you have a dog or a cat, and your dog or cat goes up to the door, and they're sticking their nose up to the door, or they're standing up on their hind legs and taking their paws and hitting the door, what are they trying to tell you? Because they're not speaking English, but they are trying to tell you something. They're trying to get you to make an inference. Right? They're trying to get you to infer that they want in or out. They want you to open the door. So inferences is where you take clues and figure out what's not said. You want to explain how an author develops the point of view of characters. So we talked about point of view before being first person and third person. Here we're going to look at point of view of characters. Right? What's a story look like through different sets of eyes? And then we're just going to look at conventions, quotation marks, periods, exclamation points, grammar, all that stuff. And then pronouns and dialogue. So we're going to read the story flipped together. And it says, preview, in this activity, you'll read an excerpt from a novel and analyze its characters. So character analysis. Setting a purpose for reading. Authors develop their characters in various ways. When looking for evidence of characterization, look for words and phrases that describe the character's appearance, what the character says, dialogue, what others say about the character, and the character's actions. As you read the excerpt from Flipped, underline the evidence that shows how author Wendelin van Dranen develops her characters. Now, the big thing for characterization that I'm going to give you is in a separate Edpuzzle Thursday, which is, remember the acronym STEAL. We can characterize someone through their speech, thoughts, effects on others, appearance, okay, or language. So basically, just to summarize, it's what the character looks like, what they do, right? That tells us about who the character is. So we're going to read Flip together from the chapter Diving Under. All I've ever wanted is for Julie Baker to leave me alone, for her to back off. Just give me some space. All right, so we don't know who the speaker is, but we know it's first person because they say all I've ever wanted. And they're describing this Julie Baker character. So based off the clues that we know about Julie Baker so far, what's a trait that we could assign her? I might say that she is annoying. She's clingy. She's overbearing. I don't know anything about Julie, but I know from his perspective, or her, I know it's a him because I read the story, but from their perspective, he just wants her to back off. What kind of person do you want to back off? One who's annoying. So her effect on the speaker tells me that from his perspective, she's annoying. That's her trait. It all started the summer before second grade when our moving van pulled into our neighborhood. And since we're now about done with the 8th grade, that, my friend, makes more than half a decade of strategic avoidance and social discomfort. All right, so here what we know is this person has been avoiding Julie and is uncomfortable around her. We don't know why. But again, he feels, and I know it's a he because I've read the story, he feels kind of like he wishes she wasn't around. The other thing about characterization, this one they just come out and tell us about how old are these characters. Well, they just come out and tell us these characters are in the 8th grade. So we know about how old they are. She didn't just barge into my life. She barged and shoved and wedged her way into my life. Did we invite her to get into our moving van and start climbing all over boxes? No, but that's exactly what she did, taking over and showing off like only Julie Baker can. Now, the words that he's using, again, barged, shoved, wedged, those are not positive words, right? Those are words we'd use to describe something we didn't like. Somebody barged in. So again, her main trait seems to be that Julie Baker is overbearing, is another word I could use. My dad tried to stop her. Hey, he says as she's catapulting herself on board. What are you doing? You're getting mud everywhere. So true, too. Her shoes were, like, caked with the stuff. She didn't hop out, though. Instead, she planted her rear end on the floor and started pushing a big box with her feet. Don't you want some help? She glanced my way. It sure looks like you need it. I didn't like the implication. And even though my dad had been tossing me the same sort of look all week, I could tell he didn't like this girl either. Hey, don't do that, he warned her. There's some really valuable things in that box. Now, if you don't know what these words mean, right, of course they're underlined. Let's click it and see. An implication is it's like a suggested idea. It's almost something where he's making an inference. When Julie says, it sure looks like you need it, meaning you need help, the speaker here feels like she's saying, you can't do this on your own. That's what he is inferring. Oh, well, how about this one? She scoots over to a box labeled Linux and looks my way again. We should push it together. No, 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 my dad says, then pulls her up by the arm. Why don't you run along home? Your mother's probably wondering where you are. This was the beginning of my soon become acute awareness that the girl cannot take a hint of any kind. Does she zip on home like a kid should when they've been invited to leave? No. She says, oh, my mom knows where I am. She said it was fine. Then she points across the street and says, we just live right over there. Now, this is one where they just come out and tell you, right? The first one, we had to kind of infer through clues that the speaker does not like her and that he thinks she is pushy. In this case, they just come out and say, she is the kind of girl that cannot take a hint, right? She can't figure out what they're saying, right? Like when somebody says, hey, shouldn't you be at home? What they're kind of trying to nicely say is, you need to go home. My father looks to where she's pointing and mutters, oh boy. Then he looks at me and winks as he says, Bryce, isn't it time for you to go inside and help your mother? I knew right off that this was a ditch play. And I didn't think about it until later, but ditch wasn't a play I'd run with my dad before. Face it, pulling a ditch is not something discussed with dads. It's like against parental law to tell your kid it's okay to ditch someone, no matter how annoying or muddy they might be. Now, here's that word. He finally just comes out and says what he's been implying or getting us to infer, that she's annoying. How annoying this girl is. But there he was, putting the play in motion, and man, he didn't have to wink twice. I smiled and said, sure thing, then jumped off the liftgate and headed for my new front door. I heard her coming after me, but I couldn't believe it. Maybe it just sounded like she was chasing me. Maybe she was really going the other way. But before I got the nerve to look, she blasted right past me, grabbing my arm, yanking me along. This was too much. I planted myself and was about to tell her to get lost when the weirdest thing happened. I was making this big windmill motion to break away from her, but somehow on the downswing, my hand wound up tangling into hers. I couldn't believe it. There I was, holding the mud monkey's hand. I tried to shake her off, but she just clamped on tight and yanked me along, saying, come on. My mom came out of the house and immediately got the world's sappiest look on her face. Well, hello, she says to Julie. Hi. I'm still trying to pull free, but the girl's got me in a death grip. My mom's grinning, looking at our hands and my fiery red face. What's your name, honey? Juliana Baker. I live right over there, she says, pointing with her unoccupied hand. Well, I see you've met my son, she says, still grinning away. Now, why is mom grinning at this point? Okay, now I want you to make the inference. So the boy has got a fiery red face. Okay, the girl's holding his hand. Why is mom grinning here? So I'm kind of giving you the clues, trying to make it a little easier. What's the inference? Why is mom smiling? Uh-huh. Finally, I break free and do the only manly thing available when you're 7 years old. I dive behind my mother. My mom puts her arm around me and says, Bryce, honey, why don't you show Juliana around the house? I flash her help and warning signals with every part of my body, but she's not receiving. Then she shakes me off and says, go on. Now, do you think that Bryce's mother understands what's going on here? I do. So why is she doing this? You kind of have to infer, why would a parent do this to their kid? Julie would have trampled right in if my mother hadn't noticed her shoes and told her to take them off. And after those were off, my mom told her that her dirty socks had to go too. Julie wasn't embarrassed, not a bit. She just peeled them off and left them in a crusty heap on our porch. Now, Julie being caked in mud, right? She's not embarrassed about it. She leaves them in a crusty heap. What does this tell us about Julie? What can we infer? I didn't exactly give her a tour. I locked myself in the bathroom instead. After about 10 minutes of yelling back at her that no, I wasn't coming out anytime soon, things got quiet in the hall. Another 10 minutes went by before I got the nerve to peek out the door. No Julie. I snuck out and looked around, and yes, she was gone. Not a very sophisticated ditch, but hey, I was only 7. My troubles were far from over, though. Every day she came back over and over again. Can Bryce play? I could hear her asking from my hiding place behind the couch. Is he ready yet? One time she even cut across the yard and looked through my window. I spotted her in the nick of time and dove under my bed, but man, that right there tells you something about Julie Baker. She's got no concept of personal space, no respect for privacy. The world is her playground, and watch out below. Julie is on the slide. All right, so we kind of inferred a lot about Julie here, right? Or we're just told. Okay. The boy tells us that she's dirty, she's annoying, she's pushy. But what can we infer about the boy? So let me give you some clues here. He hides behind his mother. He hides in the bathroom. What do those tell you about the boy that he doesn't mention, but we can infer? All right, so from the chapter Flipped. The first day I met Bryce Lowski, I flipped. Honestly, one look at him and I became a lunatic. It's his eyes. Something in his eyes. They're blue and framed in the blackness of his lashes, and they're dazzling. Absolutely breathtaking. All right, so this is being told from first-person perspective. This is being told from the perspective of Julie. So now we know, why is Julie so pushy? What can we infer from this first paragraph? All right, give you the clue. She talks a ton about his eyes, and she flipped. What does that mean? It's been over 6 years now, and I learned long ago to hide my feelings. But oh, those first days, those first years, I thought I would die for wanting to be with him. All right, getting more confirmation here, right? If you didn't figure it out before, she's got a huge crush on Bryce Lowski. 2 days before the second grade is when it started, although the anticipation began weeks before, ever since my mother had told me that there was a family with a boy my age moving into the new house right across the street. Soccer camp had ended, and I'd been so bored because there was nobody, absolutely nobody in the neighborhood to play with. Oh, there were kids, but every one of them was older. That was dandy for my brothers, but what it left me was home alone. So here we can infer that Julie, right, at first she just wanted to play with the kid because she was lonely. My mother was there, but she had better things to do than kick a soccer ball around, so she said anyway. At the time, I didn't think there was anything better than kicking a soccer ball around, especially not the likes of laundry or dishes or vacuuming, but my mother didn't agree. And the danger of being home alone with her was that she'd recruit me to help her wash or dust or vacuum, and she wouldn't tolerate the dribbling of a soccer ball around the house as I moved from chore to chore. To play it safe, I waited outside for weeks, just in case the new neighbors moved in early. Literally, it was weeks. Okay, now what does that tell us about this girl? That she will wait for weeks. All right, I can infer a couple things. What can you infer? All right, so what I inferred, she's patient, she's willing to wait, she's got some perseverance, right? It means she doesn't give up early. Okay, she's determined. So I see some positives here because she's like, I'm gonna do what I need to do to make a friend, right? But I also see that there's some negative stuff here because she's also kind of ditching her mom and she's avoiding doing work. So she wants to make friends. She doesn't like housework. Sounds like a pretty typical kid, right? I entertain myself by playing soccer with our dog, Champ. Mostly he'd just block because a dog can't exactly kick and score, but once in a while he'd dribble with his nose. The scent of a ball must overwhelm a dog, though, because Champ would eventually try to chomp it and then lose the ball to me. Now, we can also infer here, too, why was she so muddy? Why were her shoes so muddy? Now we know she's been playing soccer. When the Lodski's moving van finally arrived, everyone in my family was happy. Little Juliana was finally going to have a playmate. My mother, being the truly sensible adult that she is, made me wait more than an hour before going over to meet him. Give them a chance to stretch their legs, Juliana, she said. They'll want some time to adjust. She wouldn't even let me watch from the yard. I know you, sweetheart. Somehow that ball will wind up in their yard and you'll just have to go retrieve it. So I watched from the window, and every few minutes I'd ask, now? And she'd say, give them a little longer, would you? Then the phone rang, and the minute I was sure she was good and preoccupied, I tugged on her sleeve and asked, now? Okay, so another thing that you can say here is that if I had to infer, she's excited and she's impatient. What is she doing to show that she's excited and that she's impatient? I was too excited not to charge across the street, but I did try very hard to be civilized once I got them to the moving van. I stood outside looking in for a record-breaking length of time, which was hard because there he was, about halfway back, my new sure-to-be best friend, Bryce Losky. Bryce wasn't really doing much of anything. He was more hanging back, watching his father move boxes onto the liftgate. I remember feeling sorry for Mr. Losky because he looked worn out, moving boxes all by himself. I also remember that he and Bryce were wearing matched turquoise polo shirts, which I thought was really cute, really nice. When I couldn't stand it any longer, I called hi into the van, which made Bryce jump, and then, quick as a cricket, he started pushing a box like he'd been working all along. I could tell from the way that Bryce was acting so guilty that he was supposed to be moving boxes, but he was sick of it. He'd probably been moving things for days. It was easy to see that he needed a rest. He needed some juice. Something. It was also easy to see that Mr. Losky wasn't about to let him quit. He was going to keep on moving boxes around until he collapsed, and by then Bryce might be dead. Dead before he'd had the chance to move in. The tragedy of it catapulted me into the moving van. I had to help. I had to save him. Now, if you go back to how Bryce felt at this point, right? How does Bryce say that he feels? He feels annoyed, right? But from Julie's perspective, she's like the savior. She's showing up to save the day here. And so we see that characters' perspectives of the same event are quite different. When I got to his side to help him shove a box forward, the poor boy was so exhausted that he just moved aside and let me take over. Mr. Losky didn't want to help, but at least I didn't want me to help. But at least I saved Bryce. I'd been in the moving van all of 3 minutes when his dad sent him off to help his mother unpack things inside the house. I chased Bryce up the walkway, and that's when everything changed. You see, I caught up to him and grabbed his arm, trying to stop him so maybe we could play a little before he got trapped inside. And the next thing I know, he's holding my hand, looking right into my eyes. Now, from her perspective, right, what she is inferring is that Bryce wants this to happen. But you have to think back to Bryce. Bryce said he was just waving his arms around and just accidentally grabbed her hand. Now, who is right? You can't say. Could Bryce be lying? Yes. Happens all the time, right? Kids always lie. Oh, no, I don't like her. I don't like him. They're not my crush. No, you guys lie all the time. Could Bryce be lying? Yes. Could Julie misinterpret what happened and think that, Bryce was sending her some kind of signal that he liked her, but really it was an accident? Absolutely possible as well. So which character is telling the truth? They both are. They're just telling the truth from their perspective. From what they saw and experienced, this is what the event meant. My heart stopped. It just stopped beating. And for the first time in my life, I had that feeling, like the world is moving all around you, all beneath you, all inside you, and you're floating floating in midair, and the only thing keeping you from drifting away is the other person's eyes. They're connected to yours by some invisible physical force, and they hold you fast while the rest of the world swirls and twirls and falls completely away. I almost got my first kiss that day. I'm sure of it. But then his mother came out from the front door, and he was so embarrassed that his cheeks turned completely red. And the next thing you know, he's hiding in the bathroom. Now, again, Julie's perspective, right? She's inferring based off what she sees. She thinks Bryce was in love with her. And why was Bryce hiding? He was embarrassed because his mom saw. Right? Now, Bryce tells us he was really hiding from Julie. Which character's telling the truth, we can't really tell. And they kind of both are from their perspective. Although Bryce could be lying because he doesn't want to be embarrassed. I was waiting for him to come out when his sister Lynetta saw me in the hallway. She seemed big and mature to me, and since she wanted to know what was going on, I told her a little bit about it. I shouldn't have, though, because she wiggled the bathroom doorknob and started teasing Bryce something fierce. "Hey, baby brother," she called through the door. "There's a hot chick out here waiting for you. What's the matter? Afraid she's got cooties?" It was so embarrassing. I yanked on her arm and told her to stop it, but she wouldn't. So finally, I just left. I found my mother outside talking to Miss Losky. Mom had given her the beautiful lemon bundt cake that was supposed to be our dessert that night. The powdered sugar looked soft and white, and the cake was still warm, sending sweet lemon smells into the air. All right, now, I want to just look at this for a second, not talk characters, but I want to talk sensory description. So let me highlight this. Looking at this part right here, what are some sensory words here that describe it? She doesn't just say, "My mom brought a cake." What are some sensory words there? All right, she says that it's a beautiful lemon bundt cake. Right? The powdered sugar looked soft and white, and the cake was still warm, sending sweet lemon smells into the air. Oh man, that makes you hungry, right? My mouth was watering just looking at it, but it was in Mrs. Losky's hands, and I knew there was no getting it back. All I could do was try to eat up the smells while I listened to the two of them discuss grocery stores and the weather forecast. After that, Mom and I went home. It was very strange. I hadn't gotten to play with Bryce at all. All I knew was that his eyes were a dizzying blue, that he had a sister who was not to be trusted, and that he'd almost kissed me.